Good morning. I'm Jeanette Millin Young, your senator, your voice, your advocate in the 29th legislature. This morning's broadcast will be somewhat different. Today I will be addressing Governor John DeYoung Jr. directly, and I ask you to listen in. Governor DeYoung, I respectfully address you through this forum because experience has demonstrated that this is the only way, outside the Senate floor, to ensure that these words are heard and heard accurately by the people of the Virgin Islands. Very often lately, you and your media surrogates have made references to me and to my opposition to your proposals for borrowing to meet operating expenses and for increasing the gross receipts tax. In that vein, I must at least thank you for recognizing that my position and my actions on those issues have been consistent. I stated in 2010 when I was running for the Senate, and I reiterate now, that we simply cannot borrow our way out of our crisis. Borrowing for operating expenses without fairly concrete assurances of higher revenues in the near future only kicks the can a little further down the road and digs us deeper into a hole. Furthermore, unlike the U.S. government, which can raise its own debt ceiling, the Virgin Islands government has very finite limits as to how much debt it can accrue. In addition, as Fitch Ratings has recently indicated, lending institutions may have reason, considering current conditions, to be leery about extending further credit, as the VI's bond ratings are possibly subject to downgrading. As such, this loan may represent the last capital the government can access for some time. We simply cannot spend the money without a plan. It would be a complete abdication of our responsibilities as the elected leaders of this community. This was so on December 23, 2011, and it is doubly so now in the wake of Havensa's announcement of its impending closure. To borrow and spend our last capital without setting aside funds for efficiency improvements to WAPA and for other measures to address our energy crisis, which has been exacerbated by the impending departure of Havensa, is nothing short of madness, and I will never vote for such a measure. You ask if the opponents to the legislation have other options. I do. The first of them, as I've repeated often, is to better manage the government's spending. The proposition that personnel costs and fringe benefits are the only areas that the government can reduce its spending is not taken seriously by thinking Virgin Islanders. The second is to explore other revenue measures, which do not have such a dampening effect on business and consumer activity. In almost every state in the nation and all around the globe, governments are reducing, not raising, reducing business taxes in order to encourage economic activity. Raising business taxes while simultaneously saying that we must grow our private sector in order to survive our crisis is a profound contradiction in terms. I continue to discuss other revenue measures with my colleagues, and I'm willing, at the appropriate time, to sit down with you. However, I must be open and honest about my reservations and my conditions, which share a common basis. There's no delicate way to state this. So I'm simply going to have to insist on behalf of the people of the Virgin Islands that you enter into any such discussion with a firm commitment to keep your word. In 2010, when you were running for re-election, you negotiated raises and promised payment of retroactive increases. By 2 months after the election, however, the tune had changed substantially, and fiscal challenges, strangely undetectable during the election season, now threatened the livelihood of government workers. 2 weeks ago today, in a meeting with other members of the legislature, we were assured that you had promised to refrain from further layoffs until the legislature acted one way or another on the following Tuesday. Yet it is now clear that contrary to your promise, termination letters were going out to employees even as the legislature was considering the bill to borrow. So, Governor DeYoung, I accept your invitation to begin dialogue in an attempt to bring real solutions to the crisis facing the Virgin Islands community. However, there are two things that I, for one, require if there's to be any meaningful basis for going forward, and both of them regard the intertwined issues of trust and verifiability. First, the finances of the government of the Virgin Islands must be transparent and visible for the review of the legislative branch of government. The Post-Audit Division must, in accordance with Virgin Islands law, be granted the ability to view the accounts and balances of the Virgin Islands government for itself. Secondly, there must be a real commitment to honest and open dialogue in which the agreements reached are actually adhered to and in which there is a shared willingness to find real solutions rather than stopgap measures that are doomed to fail. Lastly, you must immediately stop the terminations of government employees until both branches have had once again the opportunity to meet and discuss exactly where we are and what our available courses are in the light of the game-changing Havensa departure, as you ask of the WAPA Governing Board during your State of the Territory address. And deservingly so. Give the people of the Virgin Islands your plan for restructuring government personnel and services. Just because you say you need more money doesn't make it so. Show me your plan and show me the money, and we can talk. And finally, Governor, I respectfully ask that you accept at least a speck of responsibility for our present fiscal condition. My fellow Virgin Islanders, God's willing, I'll be back to talk with you about my legislative agenda next week, same time, same station. Until then, I'm Jeanette Millin Young, your senator, your voice, your advocate in the 29th legislature.